Hello and welcome to Bread and Thread, a podcast about food and domestic history. I'm Liz.
And I'm Hazel. We are two friends who studied archaeology together and love history and making things and talking about the history of baking things. And we normally like to start by talking about what we have been making and or baking. So what have you been up to?
I've made a lot of progress on the Mothra part of my Mothra versus Godzilla cross stitch. Because
Amazing.
when you have a special interest and then you do a craft related to it, you just kind of sit there for hours and do it. So I've
Mhm.
I've done one wing and the body and the head, and honestly about half of the other wing at this point. And
It is taking form.
it is. She actually looks like Mothra now.
Yes, that is excellent. And I enjoy it.
Which I will probably have finished the Mothra bit by the time this episode goes up. So that will
Ooh,
be viewable on my Instagram, I'm sure.
you should share Mothra with everybody.
I simply love her. So what have you been up to?
I am getting ready to go and bake gingerbread after we finish recording, actually.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's getting towards that time of year, although you can eat gingerbread any time of year. I'm not your boss. But I tend to make it about this time of year, and tomorrow is our last day on campus, like everyone together. So I was gonna bake gingerbread to take in as a thing for my project group.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I am an A plus human,
Yes, you are.
and everyone should be friends with me.
The thing is, it's true.
Depending on the quality of my gingerbread, I don't know, it might be terrible. In which case, I would let you off for not being my best friend. But it's gonna be fun. I love making gingerbread because you get to melt the golden syrup and the sugar together, and it's like gloopy and delicious. And also the smell of the spices, and it's just so time, it's so winter time.
No, I know what you mean. I always make sticky toffee pudding in December and only in December, and it's a very
Mm.
similar feeling.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And I have fun cutter shapes. So yeah. Right, so shall we go on to the I was gonna make a joke, but I'm not sure if it would reveal the topic of the episode if you
It's
wanna
okay if you
surprise.
reveal it.
Do you wanna get into the meat and potatoes of this episode?
I do. Um, so yeah, when this episode goes up, the 19th of December, 2021, is the 20th anniversary of the theatrical release of Fellowship of the Ring,
My goodness.
and I feel a deep spiritual connection to hobbits. So this is a very
Can
important
relate.
date for me.
I mean, it is of course a joyous day, but also it's been 20 years.
Yeah, it's the same year that my sister was born, so I've been feeling it since her birthday.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, I'm gonna talk about potatoes.
Excellent. I also have something Hobbit related for local larder, but, yeah,
I'm
we
very
will get to
excited.
that later. Tell me about potatoes.
So I think the first question to answer is what is Taters Precious?
What is taters, eh?
Um, so they are the tubers, which is big starchy masses that grow on the root of the Solanum tuberosum plant.
Ooh, that's a good name.
Um, yeah, so the wild species probably originated in Peru,
Mhm.
and we think that it was probably domesticated in either Peru or Bolivia around 8 to 5,000 years BCE.
Oh, wow.
Although the first
That's
yeah, that's people do genome things to work out when different mutations happened, and I don't understand it, but it's very cool.
yeah, that's an old tuber.
Yeah, ancient potato. But the first physical evidence we have is from the Chiripa people in
Okay.
Anson, Peru, um, about 2,500 years BC. So we know that it was domesticated by then, and we have actually depictions from Antiplano, which is also in Peru, on vessels, like paintings on jars and things of potato plants. And
Wow.
we have potato-shaped ceramics.
That is cool. I wanna see an ancient potato-shaped ornament.
Allow me to send you a picture.
Yes, please. I love it. I don't know what that is for, but I love it.
I also do not know what it is, but yeah, I will tweet that picture. That will probably be the clue for this episode.
That would be a good idea.
So yeah, it seems to have been the primary source of carbohydrates in,
Mhm.
again, sort of Bolivia, northern Peru, and similar to now, you'd have them boiled, mashed, stick it in a stew. Um, but also things like tokosh, which is a fermented potato pulp, and
Okay.
chunyo, which is naturally freeze-dried potatoes. So you leave them out
Um,
to sort of freeze and thaw,
uh-huh.
just with the weather, and that forces the water out of them, so they dry and shrivel up, but they're still edible for years, and they still have all of their nutrients, and then you can store them because they get really salt.
Okay. That is incredible.
And yeah, like I say, it seems to have been a staple for a lot of pre-colonization South America, especially the Inca Empire. Especially,
Most cultures seem to have a main carbohydrate, right?
yeah, and sort of in South America, you get a lot of the time it's maize, but when you can't get maize to grow, it seems to be potato, and that's
Okay.
going to be a theme in the history of the potato. But they're also found in Patagonia, in the it's basically the southernmost limit of where we have archaeological evidence for pre-colonization agriculture in South America. We have potatoes. So it seems like potatoes were just incredibly important for South America as a whole.
Mhm.
Um, and then, as you might expect, they make their way to Europe with Spanish sailors.
So I've heard the story about potatoes being taken to the court of Queen Elizabeth I and like her trying to eat a potato raw and going like, "Oh, this is terrible." Is that true?
I haven't been able to find any reliable sources for that.
Mhm.
It does seem, though, just in general, that people were reluctant to eat them, despite, having seen native South Americans eating them.
Okay.
Um, yeah, there's a theory that it was because they are related to deadly nightshade. To also put people off eating
Oh,
tomatoes for a very long time because it's all the same family.
hey, okay. I did not know that. That is very cool.
But they did quite quickly become a working class food, so obviously some people were willing to eat them. There's mentions of Basque fishermen using them in the 16th century.
What, to catch fish?
No, as on board food.
Oh, okay. Unrelated to to them being fishermen.
They just it just happened to be fishermen who needed, food that will last in basically a cupboard for a long time.
That makes more sense.
And I mean, as anyone that's found one sad potato at the back of the cupboard
Oh,
will testify, you know, it's not that bad.
it's fine. You scrape off the eyes, you eat the potato.
Yeah. Yeah. So they seem to have got to Spain around 1570 in terms of like people actually eating them. But there's
Okay.
also, yeah, they seem to have spread pretty quickly because there is evidence of them being exported from the Canary Islands to Antwerp in the Netherlands in 1567.
Wow.
So it seems that people were basically, they got them from South America and then they went and did some colonialism in other places. They took the potatoes with them as an easy source of food.
Okay.
And there seems to be people gifting them, people gifting them to each other.
That's very Stardew Valley.
Yeah, um, especially potato flowers.
Oh,
Although Philip II of Spain apparently sent potatoes to the Pope.
okay. I can't decide if that's a compliment or not.
I mean, apparently it was a compliment.
Are the top parts of the potato mildly poisonous, or did I make that up?
No, they are, because again, it's related to deadly nightshade.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Actually, I mean, to be honest, if someone gave me a potato as a present, I would be pretty happy, especially if they like carved a heart into it or something.
There is a company that will send you, yeah, you can pay them to send someone a potato with something written on it in Sharpie.
Okay. Couldn't you just do that yourself for free?
Oh, you absolutely could, but you know,
I guess if you don't happen to have a potato lying around.
but yeah, potato plants, if you leave them long enough, do produce a toxic fruit,
Okay.
which contains a class of poison called glycoalkaloids,
Ooh.
which yeah are found in other plants in the same family.
Mhm.
And it seems that while potatoes contained higher concentrations, and then that was gradually bred out. Although this this is leaping forward a bit, but it's relevant. So a potato cultivar was released to the market in 1967, called the Lenape, and was then withdrawn in 1970 when they realized that it contained high levels of glycoalkaloids.
Oh, no.
So now new cultivars have to be tested for glycoalkaloids and have to stay below a certain threshold, which is
Worrying.
good. I'm glad
Like,
that
I
there's now a legal limit to how poisonous the potatoes can be.
you mean before it was just a free-for-all? Like, technically it was legal to poison someone with a potato.
Well, it seems more that people didn't realize that they could be breeding the poison back in, which is fun.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, potatoes spread very quickly as a food for the working class. Was sort of
Mhm.
grown by, or rather spread by richer people as like, and then you poor people can go and eat that because it was a lot easier to grow than grains. Obviously, our staple carbohydrates in Europe are grains.
Yeah, and takes a lot less processing, I guess.
Yeah, produces enough food for 10 people per acre of potato plants, which you're never going to get that with something like wheat.
Mhm.
And you can also live almost exclusively on potatoes, as anyone
Alright.
who's read or seen The Martian may already be aware of.
I have not seen The Martian. What happens in The Martian? Does he live on potatoes?
He gets stranded on Mars and lives on potatoes.
I know there's probably a lot more dramatic stuff to it than that, but I would watch a film about that. Is it Ben Affleck?
Um, Matt Damon.
Matt Damon. Okay, I get them confused. I would watch a film about Matt Damon sitting on Mars eating potatoes just for like 2 hours.
Honestly, like, The Martian is very funny. But yeah, it was especially popular during the Little Ice Age because it was a lot easier to cultivate when it was cold. Yes. So I don't know if you've heard, there's a completely apocryphal but very fun story about Frederick II of Prussia and potatoes.
Okay.
So
Um,
he was very much for big population increases, more villages, clearing woodland for farmland, all that stuff.
huh.
And between 1746 and 1768, he put out 15 different orders for different regions of Prussia where all of the farmers had to start growing potatoes because it would increase the food
Okay.
supply of the country.
That seems unwise. I mean, when you haven't necessarily tested how well this is gonna adapt to your, um, country's growing system.
Well, yeah, he was very for monoculture and things like that. But I do
Mhm.
think we're talking, almost 200 years after their introduction to Europe.
Mhm.
I think he was pretty certain that they would grow.
Okay.
But the story
How'd it go?
goes that the farmers rejected it, and so he said,
Oh.
actually, potatoes are only for royalty, and set guards on the potato fields who were instructed to look the other way, and then the potatoes got poached, and growing potatoes actually spread. Completely apocryphal.
Okay.
Um, and he's also not the only person that story was told about. But the story started spreading around, especially on Reddit and Tumblr a couple of years ago.
Right. Oh, is it one of those "Today I learned" kind of things?
Yeah, but he was very pro potato. He is known as Potato King because his theory was if we grow more potatoes to feed the peasants, we can reserve grains for the military, and then be all expansionist because that's what European countries do.
Okay, that is extremely European 18th, 19th century.
Yeah.
That's a mood.
Um,
I mean, not a particularly relatable mood, but it's a mood.
yeah, and then similar ideas pop up in especially places like Ireland and Scotland. And we
Mhm.
will do a separate episode on what happened in Ireland with potatoes because it merits a whole episode of its own, quite frankly.
Yeah, no, I think that deserves a bit more of an in-depth discussion.
So yeah, I want to talk about the spread of potatoes in France because there was a scientist in, again, the 18th century named Antoine Augustin Parmentier.
That rings a bell. I can't remember
Um,
why.
I mean, he's a very big name. He established the first mandatory smallpox vaccination campaign under
Okay.
Napoleon. He worked on extraction of sugar from sugar beets, studied refrigeration, which this is
Mhm.
the 18th century. so
Wow.
that's pretty cool.
Okay.
But he was a food scientist, and he was one of the first people to actually study the nutritional value of potatoes.
Right.
So he established that potatoes contain pretty much all, like, close to all of the vitamins and minerals that you need, and basically scientifically proved what a lot of people already knew, that you can basically just live on potatoes if you need to. It's not a fun diet, but it'll keep you going.
No, I mean, it's an odd thing considering they don't look that nutritious. It just looks like kind of just fluffy white carb, right?
Mm.
But yeah, secret nutrition.
And yeah, a lot of potato containing dishes ended up named after Parmentier. There's Hatch's Parmentier, which is another name for shepherd's pie. Salad Parmentier, which is potato salad. Puree Parmentier, which you can probably guess is mashed potato.
I'm gonna start using all these though because they will make me sound a lot fancier. Turning up at a barbecue like, "This isn't potato salad. What do you think I am, a peasant? This is salad parmentier."
Um, yeah, Brandade de Moreau Parmentier is one that actually sounds quite nice. Is salt, cod, and olive oil in
Ooh.
mashed potato.
Oh,
I kind of want to try that.
okay.
I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's quite common to like dunk bread in it,
Oh,
or serve it with potatoes, which I quite like. I feel like Parmentier would approve.
yeah.
Yeah, in the 1770s, he wrote an essay about how potatoes were the best substitute for flour.
I guess, yeah, potato flour is a thing, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
But does he mean, like, potatoes as in just the potatoes, not processed into flour?
Yeah, just potatoes in general. Were there to be a wheat shortage, which there wasn't at the time, but there
Okay.
was later.
Ah. Yes. Um, okay. Actually, I have made, a cake with potato instead of flour. It was for a person with celiac who couldn't eat gluten, so it was like a lemon cake. It was actually very nice, very moist.
Yeah, I've heard of chocolate cake with mashed potato in it as a gluten-free thing as
Mm,
well.
okay.
Like not potato flour, just full on mashed potato in there.
Yeah, yeah, that's how I made the lemon cake. It was like mashed potato and then all the other things.
I imagine it contributes a nice level of moisture.
Yeah, definitely. It was quite heavy, like not a light sponge texture, but it was still definitely cakey.
But yeah, so he became interested in potatoes actually after being imprisoned by the Prussian army during the Seven
Oh,
Years' War.
okay.
Because as I said, in Prussia it was food for peasants, whereas in France it was basically hog feed.
Mhm.
And he got interested in them. Es- es- although interestingly, the cultivation of the potato was illegal in France at the time that he wrote this essay, because
Sorry, what?
they were thought to cause leprosy. Because 18th century science.
Okay. So how come people got leprosy before the potato was introduced to Europe?
M- Multiple things can cause leprosy. You know, being struck down by God, sloth,
Uh,
weird smells.
you don't be mean to sloths.
But he was apparently known for publicity stunts to promote the potato. He gave Marie Antoinette a bouquet of potato blossoms.
Oh, that's charming. I hope she didn't get too close to them.
Well, Marie Antoinette was very into sort of the abstract concept of agriculture. She
Mhm.
was a hashtag cottagecore queen.
I have heard that, yeah.
Um, but yeah, and the story about Frederick the Great also exists about Parmentier, about posting armed guards on his potato fields so that
Ah,
people
of
would steal the
course.
potatoes.
'Cause you wouldn't steal the potatoes if they were just unguarded, right? That's clearly not very valuable.
Well, exactly. Like I said, potatoes did help during the famines of the Little Ice Age.
Oh.
Um, because as I said, they were just easier than things like wheat and barley to grow in these cold conditions.
Mhm.
Then the 1840s arrive, and we get
Yes.
the European potato failure, where basically all of the potato crops failed to some extent.
Oof. So, was that due to some kind of disease, plant disease?
Yes, it's called the potato blight,
Mm,
which is a kind of mold that grows on potatoes.
okay. So what's the theory? Was that it was spread across, like, on the winds or something? Or from contaminated potatoes? Or, like, how did it get around?
Yeah, basically because you'd grow, because most potatoes are basically clones.
Mhm.
Because you take one from one plant, you plant it, and then it grows more potatoes. They were all vulnerable to this mold when it hit, and then it just spread around.
See, I mean, that sounds extremely not good for people who are relying on potatoes.
Yeah, the 1840s were actually known as the Hungry Forties because of the potato blight.
Does that have anything to do with the sort of series of revolutions that went on across Europe?
The revolutions of 1848.
Ah,
The
yes,
next part of
those.
my notes, yes.
Right, because I knew about that, but I had no idea it was anything to do with the potato blight.
Yeah, there's a theory that because at this point most peasants were relying on potatoes to some extent, and
Mhm,
then all the potatoes failed.
mhm.
Everyone was hungry, and when everyone is hungry, they tend to revolt.
And let me guess, the governments didn't do very much about everyone being hungry.
Um, Not about people being hungry, although some social change did pop up. Um, so I just want to read out the list of places which had 1848 revolutions or rebellions.
Okay.
Italy, France, Germany, Denmark, Hungary, Sweden, Switzerland, Poland, Romania, Belgium, Ireland, Spain, some parts of Britain, Lithuania, the Isle of Man, large swathes of Latin America. But some of these revolts did lead to long-lasting consequences. In Hungary, it's credited with the freeing of the serfs.
Oh, wow.
It's largely credited with helping towards the unification of Italy and Germany,
Right.
um, the formation of the Second French Republic.
Okay.
Like all of this stuff, obviously, a lot of it was in the works anyway, but
Mhm.
it was kind of the spark in the powder keg for a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that sounds like it would set things off.
Yeah, it's known as the Springtime of Nations, apparently,
Ooh.
1848. Because, yeah, it was basically pretty much all of Europe and several other places just going, you know what? We're hungry and we hate rich people. Let's do something about it.
Uh-huh. That is where a lot of change seems to come from.
Well, yeah, like mass mortality events do seem to lead to a lot of social change. Hint, hint.
Mhm.
I should mention just because it's the only continent I haven't mentioned yet. Potatoes did spread to Asia and Australasia, obviously, partly through colonialism in places like Australia and New Zealand, and partly through trade. Population growth in the during the Qing dynasty made it quite popular because
Mhm.
again, you can feed a lot of people with potatoes.
Mhm. There's some varieties of, like, potato-like plants that are native to Asia. Because my mum grows this, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like a Himalayan small lemony potato thing.
Yeah, and there's taro as well, which shows up a lot in
Mm.
Indonesian and Japanese, especially food, which is like a purple sweet potato type thing.
Yeah, I've unfortunately, as yet, never eaten any, but I've seen pictures of amazing sweets made with taro.
I've had taro pudding.
How is it?
I wasn't a fan, to be honest,
Mhm.
but I tried it, and that's the important thing because it's nice to try new things.
Definitely.
Like I see why people like it, but I don't like it.
I think a lot of things are just a taste that if you grow up with it, you love it, but otherwise it takes a bit of acquiring.
Hmm. Um. So yeah, I'm going to end there, I think. And I think you said next episode you'll go more in depth on the Hungry Forties and specifically the Irish potato famine.
I will tackle that one.
But in the meantime, it's time for local larder.
Hello, I'm Mod Pencil from Probably Bad RPG Ideas. If you'd like to hear discussions of ideas such as what if in my urban fantasy game magic turns out to not be real, and what is the best rules for an ogre, then listen to the Probably Bad podcast, which is available on everywhere podcasts are and also YouTube. Or check out our Tumblr and Twitter.
It is. And I'm gonna keep on the Hobbit theme and talk a little bit about seed cake.
Oh,
Yes. Which as far as I've been able to make out is, I mean, quite quite a traditional British thing. The seed in question is normally caraway seeds, which of course are used in lots of different places around the world. But
it's like Guzna cakes.
yes, like even Lancashire. But
Even the unsophisticated wilds of Lancaster, yes.
the wild backwards remote places of Lancashire. um, but seed cake as a thing is quite a traditional British food. So yeah, very local larder. Um, Now seed cake is mentioned in The Hobbit, quite near the beginning of The Hobbit, actually, in an unexpected party. When the dwarves all come to Bilbo's house and they're eating all his food, and Barling gets there and he asks for some seed cake. Um, And yeah, asks if Bilbo has any seed cake, and Bilbo says lots. Bilbo found himself answering to his surprise, and he found himself scuttling off too to the cellar to fill a pint beer mug, and then to the pantry to fetch 2 beautiful round seed cakes which he had baked that afternoon for his after-supper morsel. Which definitely should be a thing more, I think, having an after-supper morsel. So,
Hobbits do life right.
mhm. So Bilbo Baggins is a baker of seed cake, which is a sort of fairly dense cake containing usually caraway seeds, which give it a sort of anisey type flavour. But there is some controversy over the seed. Like, I've seen a few recipes that say it doesn't necessarily matter what seed you use, as long as it's like some kind of, anise, caraway, cardamom type of thing. But then some of them are like, no, it's got to be caraway, otherwise it isn't a seed cake, it's just a cake with seeds in it.
People get so passionate about food, it's beautiful.
I know, it's wonderful. Humans are great. Um, but the cake in this form doesn't seem to be like the original version of it. As far as I can tell, it seems like the cake goes back quite a long way. There's cakes that are described that sound like this kind of thing in medieval sources,
Mhm.
but we don't have any recipes until sort of the 17th century. So there's one in Gervase Markham's English Huswith. And there's actually 2 in The Art of Cookery Made Plain and Easy by Hannah Glass. Which I like because she has a recipe for a cheap seed cake and a rich seed cake.
I like that.
Yeah, it kind of covers all your bases, but they're very much different ends of the spectrum. Like, there's no in between. The cheap seed cake sounds like more of a bready thing, like a bready scone type thing. Like, there's no eggs in it, and it's leavened with yeast. So yeah, kind of a little bit more bready, really. But it has caraway seeds in. She says to put some caraway seeds in just before it goes in the oven. And the rich seed cake, or the nun's cake, uses 35 eggs and 4 pounds of butter
Slightly different.
and 6 ounces of caraway seeds.
Is there an explanation for why this is a nun's cake?
No, there isn't. It just says feeding a lot of nuns, I guess.
It's just the cake for nuns, obviously.
Obviously, this is what you feed nuns. And she also says you can put cinnamon and ambergris in it, which I'm not exactly sure what ambergris is. Do you know?
Oh, yes, we've had it has come up before.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so it's a waxy substance produced by the digestive system of the sperm whale.
Okay,
Um,
that's not what I
often
was
used in often used in
expecting.
perfumes
That's not what I was
traditionally.
expecting it to be.
No, it's a weird thing. We have records of one of the Charleses, I don't remember which one, eating it with eggs.
Why?
Rich people.
I can't think
That's
of
what
any
I'm going with.
reason. I can't think of a reason that would taste or smell nice.
Apparently, it doesn't smell nice.
What? People really will buy things just because they're expensive.
Yeah, ambergris is on the master list, so we will cover it eventually.
Okay. That's good. I would like to know more and why. Um Yeah, so she also says in this recipe, you put the caraway seeds in, beating it up all the time for 2 hours together. 2 hours?
Mrs. Glass,
What?
that sounds
What?
painful.
That does. I don't understand how you're doing this unless you've got like 10 servants and they're all taking turns. Maybe you
Kind of
pass it around the
possible,
nuns,
to
I
be
don't know.
fair. Like, it's
Um,
entirely possible that was the plan.
yeah. And it takes 3 hours in the oven as well, but I guess if it's the olden days and your oven's just on all day anyway, that doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Yeah, so that is our 17th century, or rather with Hannah Glass, 18th century seed cake. And then it sort of becomes, going into the Victorian period, a bit more sort of traditionally cakey, more like a kind of tea loaf, I guess, because all of the older sources seem to describe it as a round cake, like in The Hobbit. And then most of the ones I've seen from like modern recipes are loaf shaped. So I don't know when that happened. I guess if it's a loaf shape, you can cut off slices more easily and put butter in it or whatever if you want to.
Yeah.
But it seems like in the more sort of traditional, like farmhousey kind of seed cake was still a bit smaller around. So maybe that's where the Hobbit seed cakes being round came from.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that Bilbo would just make individual serving ones rather than a big loaf.
It does.
Because he
It
lives
does.
alone.
It does. Although, like, I don't know, if you're baking cake anyway, that makes sense. But then seed cake is known for keeping a little bit longer than other cakes.
Yeah, and
I
if you
guess.
have to slice into it, it's not going to last as long.
Mm, um, yeah, and it's a little bit sort of denser and moister. It's not light and fluffy like a sponge that doesn't last as long. So
Mm.
so it's a good like farmhouse staple, really. And I think it was part of a lot of people's childhoods in the 20th century, which is why it appears in these things.
That makes sense.
It's kind of a comfort food type thing. But normally continuously flavored with caraway seeds, I find. Although, according to a recipe I found that claims to take inspiration from the English Housewife and another cookbook, you can also use anise, coriander, cardamom, or caraway, or something that puts a nice flavor in it. Although I'm not sure about coriander seed cake.
Yeah, that seems like a very different flavor to the others.
Yeah, that seems like the advice is just put flavor in. Doesn't matter what flavor, put sugar and flavor.
Yeah, I feel like fennel might work because you get that in Guzna cakes sometimes, which are normally a
Oh,
caraway.
it might, yeah. Like it sounds like kind of a sort of nutty type flavor, possibly.
Mm.
Um, yeah. So and as you have just reminded me, um, a cake does not necessarily mean cake when you're thinking historically. Um, so the kind of early round cakes could be the kind of things that you would bake like on a bake stone or like on the hearth, or something much more scony or more biscuity like a Guzna cake, or yeah, pretty much. I think probably mileage varies depending on what you have to bake it with.
Yeah, I feel like for a long time, cake just meant handheld carbohydrate.
Yeah. And you could have savory cakes as well, right? So
Yeah, I mean a small bread like a bread roll. Like one of the regional names for that is a balm cake or a bread cake.
uh-huh. So yeah, that is the sort of small but storied history of the seed cake. And I have to say, it does make me think comforting things, possibly because it's because of its association with The Hobbit, but I think I also associate it with, like, traditional tea time. Um,
You have just made me want Guzna cakes.
yeah. Although seed cake and ale apparently was popular in, in bygone days as well, so
I mean, that's just more carbs, isn't it?
yeah.
Keep you going.
I mean, yeah, that'll keep you warm. But I think cakes and ale was something that you might have in a pub as well, so
Oh, we should definitely bring that back.
absolutely.
Little plate of seed cakes on the bar instead of a bowl of nuts.
But, yeah, I will link a seed cake recipe to the Twitter when this episode comes out in case anyone feels like making one for themselves. I can recommend it. They are tasty, and it will make you feel like a hobbit.
Can you send that to me as well, please?
Yes.
So, yeah, thank you for listening. If you have an episode suggestion or want to say hi or anything like that, you can email breadandthreadpodcast@gmail.com.
You can also find us on Twitter at Bread and Thread for any retweets of things that we find interesting or related to food history, things that we have been doing, and teasers for upcoming episodes, as well as pictures of things we talk about on the podcast.
And if you want to support us, help us buy caraway seeds.
Oh, I have so many caraway seeds. I ordered them from that Whole Foods online website.
Oh no.
Yeah, I didn't realize how much it would be. I don't need to buy any right now, but I'm sure we could find other things to spend the money on.
Although I am a little bit jealous of the amount of caraway seeds you have now. But yeah, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/breadandthread, where you can get access to a Discord server where we chat about things that we're making and baking and about the episodes. There are monthly Patreon recipes available to £5 or above level patrons. And if you join at the £10 or above level, we will make a bonus episode about anything you like.
We have a YouTube channel, Bread and Thread, where you can find YouTube versions of our podcast episodes. And we also have a Tumblr where we reblog things that are interesting to us. And do we have anything else?
I believe that's it.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.